We've all heard of cursed books, ancient tomes that spell the reader to suffer, death notes that have the power to end someone's life, or the very concerning accounts of the King in Yellow, which apparently causes readers to lose touch with sanity. But what if I told you there's actually a book that causes the readers to die horrible, painful deaths? As far as sinister stories go, The King in Yellow is a collection of short stories written by Robert W. Chambers in 1895. The first 4 stories mention a forbidden play, The King in Yellow, which, if read, will drive the reader mad. Before this book, though, Charlotte Perkins Gilman's The Yellow Wallpaper story in 1892 locks the reader up with the woman whose husband shuts her up in a room in order to recover from hysteria or nervous tendencies. The thing is, she gets worse. She hyperfixates on the yellow wallpaper that lines her prison, noting every disgusting detail of it, and eventually frees herself from it. This story was a commentary against the fashionable rest cure regime for women's health at the time. But neither of these books truly compare with the deadly power of this most cursed tome. Ironically, this book I'm referring to was made because people were dying, and there were several printed and distributed, although very few remain, thankfully. Shadows from the Walls of Death explicitly states that children should not handle it, as they are extremely susceptible to its influence. This poisonous book was reproduced and sent to the leading public libraries in the state of Michigan, although many refused it due to how dangerous it was. The book itself opens with an eerily on-point passage from Leviticus. And behold, if the plague be in the walls of the house, with hollow streaks greenish or reddish, then the priest shall go out of the house to the door of the house, and shut the house up for 7 days. And he shall cause the house to be scraped within round about. And then they shall pour out the dust that they scrape off without the city and into an unclean place. Those who are allowed to handle this book today do so with extreme care. Not only do they wear gloves, but the book is encased in plastic and shut off from the world. Why? Well, the book itself is poisonous. Even being around it is not wise, as all its poisons can travel through the air. But why would someone deliberately make a book capable of killing people? The book surely isn't cursed, but there has to be a purpose behind the danger, right? And this purpose takes us back to the late 1800s. Professor R.C. Kedzie, chairman of the Committee of Poisons, was a member of the State Board of Health in 1874. And during this time, he noticed something. A lot of women were suddenly in a state of decline because of the delicate state of their lungs. As a precaution against catching a cold or worse due to perceived immunodeficiencies, these women would isolate themselves in rooms with no ventilation so that no foreign illness could be introduced. And you'd think this might make sense. I mean, if you limit yourself from contact with those who can potentially infect you, then there's far less chance you can catch something, right? But they got worse. Their condition didn't get better, and in fact, it accelerated. And this baffled people, so much so that some doctors would advise the sick women to travel, and surprisingly, that worked wonders. However, once these women would return home, their symptoms would start up again. No matter what was prescribed or done, their conditions would worsen until eventually some of them died. Of course, if it wasn't truly a sickness or disease spreading, what was it? Well, Professor Kedzie had a hunch. And no, each of these women didn't own a copy of the Shadows from the Walls of Death, which I'll explain later, but in some ways they owned parts of it. While they thought they were retreating into the comfort and safety of their own homes, that was indeed the problem. The interiors of their home were covered in poison that leaked into the air, and this was all due to the wallpaper. However, this was because their wallpaper was made with arsenic. Arsenic is a poisonous substance, a powder that causes a painful, painful death. It was also used to preserve bodies as well. Arsenic has been used by those with murderous intent in all sorts of manners. From lacing milk, it matches the color of the milk quite well, to mixing it with other beverages and sprinkling it on foods. Once ingested, it leads to severe, painful health side effects and ultimately can cause death. But why would arsenic be in wallpaper? Well, you see, it's very pretty. It produces a gorgeous verdant green, and people liked it. And where there's demand, there's a business opportunity for someone. And demand was only increasing, but awareness of its poisonous aspects was not. You see, arsenic wallpaper caused a lot of illness and sickness, and no, people didn't have to lick the walls to feel its effects. Professor Kedzie explained that arsenic can be absorbed through the skin or inhaled while breathing. And in fact, that arsenic that's inhaled is far more deadly, as people only eat at set intervals, set times to ingest the poison, but we breathe constantly. We have to breathe, and that constant exposure to the poison adds up to terrible results quickly. Kedzie noted that the larger size of the arsenic pigments, combined with the feeble sticking power of the glue, along with fluctuations of heat and cold, caused the arsenic to detach from the paper and float about the home, where they are inhaled by those that live there. It's in the air, it settles on the furniture, in the food, in everything. Arsenic can have quick localized inflammation of impact for short exposure, but for anyone constantly living in a home with this deadly paper, more serious effects would assuredly begin. Dyspepsia, neuralgia, pains in the bones and joints, constant cough, loss of flesh, just to name a few. I mean, they were constantly and chronically being poisoned. What they thought they were doing to help themselves by staying indoors and isolating was only killing them further. This is, of course, why they felt better when they traveled, since they were no longer under the effects of poison. Upon feeling better and then returning home, many lost hope of recovering from their strange illness, and so they shut themselves off from the world, eventually succumbing to the poisonous grasp of the wallpaper that they were now trapped with indefinitely. This whole situation was bad, but there really was no way to say who was responsible. It was known then at the time that wallpaper printers could not work with arsenic-based inks for more than a few weeks at a time without becoming sick themselves. So they would schedule printing runs around this. What's worse, full green arsenic wallpaper was becoming fashionable, meaning the whole wall would be covered with poison, not just the little detailed leaves and flowers. And it wasn't just greens, but anything toned with the poisonous color, so like grays and yellows and blues too, all poison. Without raising awareness, more people would die horribly. So, given this worsening grave situation, Professor Kedzie compiled his poisonous book called Shadows from the Walls of Death, which details real-life experiences in which arsenic wallpaper was to blame for illness. The book included dozens of samples of actual arsenic-laced wallpaper. He gathered these poisonous papers and bound them in order to raise awareness for which patterns and prints contained the poison, so that those inclined to decorate would be forewarned of the danger they were bringing into their own homes. For those who suffered from mysterious illnesses who had these wallpapers within their homes, upon removal of the wallpaper, their symptoms reversed and slowly recovered. And just so you know, every single background image that you've seen in this video is one of those deadly wallpapers. The more you know. But by producing this book and utilizing real, live samples, he himself had produced a poisonous piece of literature that would harm the reader. It was both the antidote and the venom. Professor Kedzie's solution was, for those that could simply not stand bare white walls, was to test their wallpaper with an ammonia water solution that any drugstore should carry. If it tests positive, remove that paper. If they simply must do something to their walls, he recommended frescoing or other, less deadly textural alternatives. If someone already had the arsenic wallpaper and simply left it to, death, Kedzie recommended varnishing the whole surface to ensure that the arsenic particles were properly affixed and wouldn't get loose and be inhaled. Still though, he said that it was really cheaper and, healthier to just remove it. In this book of poisoned papers, you'll notice that quite a few of the samples are yellow. Remember the King in Yellow and the yellow wallpaper stories? There may be more linking them than just the color, which, if you're interested, we've explored in relation to the horror genre before. Here, perhaps the yellow wallpaper in the, yellow wallpaper story was, in fact, processed with arsenic, causing pain, suffering, and mental deterioration to its forced inhabitants. Even without the poisoned paper, the story still stands on its own as a social commentary of the times, of course. But it's just one more curious link that creepily fits, especially because the time the story was written was just after the poisoned paper began to be a concern. In an effort to save so many lives, Professor R.C. Kedzie ironically compiled perhaps the most deadly book of all time, the full title of which is Shadows from the Walls of Death. Facts and Inferences prefacing a book of specimens of arsenical wallpaper. He made a book that must be kept in a sealed container so it won't hurt those around it. It's thanks to his work in testing the papers and documenting these cases that arsenic is no longer used like this today. And I think that's pretty cool. But I hope you learned something new in this twisted tale. Subscribe if you did, and I'll see you soon in my next video. Goodbye!